There are 4 countries that I would consider moving to if I was looking to make Hijrah today. And I'm somebody who's born in the UK, but I've lived in 4 different Muslim countries and I've just moved to a new Muslim country. So you're going to get all my insights, all my experience in this video. We're going to cover the insider information, the way that I think as somebody who's moved many countries and I'm very used to it. And we're going to cover some of the usual suspects, but some of the more off the trail countries that you might not have thought about. So let's get started with the classic that everyone talks about. And that is, I just want to say the Gulf in general, because to me, the Gulf is, all the countries are pretty similar. There are some, of course, differences. I lived in the UAE for about 19 years, right? So I grew up in the UAE. I went to uni in the UAE. I've done business in the UAE. I've worked in the UAE. I've got a lot of experience there. And I also lived in Saudi for a short period as well. The UAE and the Gulf in general is very comfortable. That's the first thing you've got to say about it. It's very comfortable. Things are very smooth, especially countries like UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, I would say as well. Saudi is like, probably depends where you live and stuff, but still, like, compared to the rest of the world, it's very comfortable. That's the first thing you're getting with these countries. Now, you might think, well, if you're talking about the Hijrah life and you're not living in the UAE anymore, why is that? I left the UAE for 3 main reasons. One is I wanted more stability. I didn't want to be on this rolling like 2-year visa based on my business and paying like thousands of dollars a year to keep my residency and all that. I wanted, hopefully, to find a country where I could just live, at least get 5-10 year residency permit, if not citizenship. I didn't want to have that instability, especially because I grew up with that. The other reason was community. Yes, that's true. I didn't live in Dubai or Sharjah. Maybe I would have felt a bit more community there. Maybe, I'm not sure. But in my circumstance, I did not have community. I didn't feel community. I wasn't being able to network with people, make friends for myself, my wife, my kids. It wasn't working in that sense. And the third reason was I just felt I was growing apart from the values of the country. So that's another reason why I left. And these are reasons that you want to think about when you're considering the Gulf. The other thing to consider, of course, is yes, it's comfortable. Yes, there's a lot of convenience. And even the immigration system in a lot of these countries is pretty smooth and straightforward, especially if you choke up the money. On the flip side, these are some of the more expensive countries to live in the Muslim world, right? So you get the comfort, convenience, but you pay a bit more for it. So if you're somebody who's like, you just want to get out of that country in the West, whatever, and you want to make Hijrah, but you don't have a big source of income, then these countries might not be the right ones for you. You might want to go somewhere cheaper where you can especially be more relaxed. You're already moving your whole life to a new country. Do you want to add more stress to that by knowing that you have to make a lot of money, right? And when we're talking about the Gulf or UAE in general, let's say, you're gonna, you're looking at having to make about $3,000-4,000 a month, right? Depending obviously how you live, how many kids you have, all of that kind of stuff. But you're gonna need quite a bit of money compared to other countries. Just to give you an idea of what exists, like a real country that exists, you can live in Egypt, for example, for like $700 a month, right? Obviously, depending on a lot of things. So yes, the cost of living is a factor, of course, for everything. I think these countries are a good stepping stone because they're comfortable, and leaving your country where you're born and raised, whatever, is already very uncomfortable. Because I'm a big advocate of Hijrah and stuff in general, and obviously every Muslim should be, it's not just me. Because I'm an advocate of Hijrah, I say, if it helps you just to make the move, the initial move, if moving to a comfortable, convenient country where they speak English a lot of the time, if that is what it takes to just get you out initially, then go and do it. But maybe you're not going to have that as your long-term place. But it might be the place where you go for a year, 2 years, and then you can use it as a stepping stone to elsewhere. So think of your psychology when it comes to your Hijrah, right? A lot of people, they think, okay, if I'm going to do Hijrah, I need to buy a place, for example. If I'm going to move to Egypt, I have to go to Egypt. I'm buying a place to feel I have stability. So people put a lot of demands on themselves that they don't even put on themselves when they're living in the UK, US, whatever. In the UK, US, you are renting. But all of a sudden, when you want to do Hijrah, you're like, oh, I've got to buy the place. No, think of your psychology. What is going to allow you to make that move? Now, of course, Hijrah is not a glorious, glorified, picture-perfect holiday, like you're living as though you're on holiday, which is sometimes the impression people give, especially when they move to places like the UAE. And a lot of the advantages they talk about in the UAE is material. And this is not what Hijrah is about. Let's be real. The Muhajirun, when they went to Medina, materially, it was a downgrade. Does Hijrah have to be a downgrade materially? No. But I'm just saying that Hijrah is for the sake of Allah. Hijrah is to improve your Iman. Hijrah is to improve your kids' Iman and to reduce the attacks on their Iman and their basic Aqidah, etc. And to move to a place where you could see yourself getting closer to Allah and being able to impact your family, yourself, and the Ummah more, not less. So therefore, when you're thinking of moving to these countries, you've got to ask yourself that fundamental question. Is moving here better for my Iman? Is it better for my impact and the good that I can do and the impact that I can have? Right? I'm not going to tell you that the answer to that because it's kind of an individual thing. But you've got to think about that. And that's why when you're thinking about these countries in the Gulf, you've got to think about some of these countries are different to others in terms of the stances they take, the environment that they build for the people that are living there. Some are worse than others, for sure. You know, there are some countries that I probably wouldn't touch. And there are some that, yeah, they seem to be keeping things a little more conservative. So that's something to keep in mind. But with these countries, the main thing I would think about is the element of, are you going to really stay there for a long term? Is it going to be good for your Iman? And the cost of living, are you comfortable with that? Are you okay with that? And then, you know, is this going to be a stepping stone? Or is it something you really want to fully into? And you don't have to decide that, by the way, before you make the move. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, is they think that I'm moving to Oman, for example. I'm moving to Oman. This is our place for the next 15 years. No, man. You're moving to Oman. I think you should stay at least 1 to 2 years in a country and then decide. And I know you feel like 1 or 2 years is a lot, but that's just the reality. You got to make an effort to make that country comfortable for yourself and get the most out of it for a year or two. And then you can truly decide whether it's working for you or not. So that's the Gulf. And I told you why I would consider it and some of the reasons that you might want to consider in terms of not considering it. Okay, the next country I would consider is Turkey. Even though I just kind of got kicked out of Turkey, my residency permit was not renewed. I'm not in Turkey anymore. I lived there 4.5 years. The reason it's still on the list is because Turkey has some things that are just so good going for it, right? It's an amazing country. The location is great. The climate is great. The openness in terms of da'wah is very open. Like, as long as you don't speak about Turkey and Turkish issues, there's a lot you can learn there, right? There's also like charity organizations that have been there. Some of them are continuations of the Waqf from the Ottoman times. And you can actually get involved in charity work there. You can get involved in some da'wah work there. It depends how much you want to like integrate into the Turkish society, or are you going to stick with the Arab bubble or whatever. But it's amazing in that sense as well. The nature is amazing. And the nature is not just there and amazing, but it's accessible. You know, they have like national parks, they have beaches, they have parks within the city. Like, it's very good in that sense. That's one thing that I really appreciated in Turkey. There was always a lot of greenery and there was a lot of parks, right? And I want to be in those kind of places where there's greenery, and I want my kids to grow up with more like access to nature, basically. However, it's not stable. Residency-wise, it's not stable whatsoever, right? Even my friends that I left behind there, they're thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna do to stay. One of them, he's a student, so he's got like his 3-4 year whatever student permit. But when that runs out, then what, right? And personally, just at this stage of my Hijrah life, I want somewhere that I can stay for 10 years, 20 years, right? I don't want somewhere where every year I'm wondering whether I can stay. I'm just sick of it. I don't think it's that positive for me. So it's not stable. I think citizenship is the main way to get stability, but that costs $400,000, man. You've got to invest that much in property to get it. Otherwise, maybe home ownership. If you buy a property worth $200,000 or more, then you could get residency based on that. All the others, like the student permit, the work permit, these things they cost you, or you have to get a job there. And after you finish your degree, then what, right? So personally, I'm just looking for something a bit more long-term, and that's why that's not the best. But I would still consider it, right? Especially if you have the money for the citizenship, like you go there for a few months, you're like, yeah, I see what he's talking about. And you've got that money, or you have access to that money, then, you know, it might be worth it just because of the positive things I've said about it. The other thing you have to consider, though, with Turkey is you should move there with the intention of learning the language. 100%. You need to learn the language to live in Turkey. I learned some of it just by osmosis, but I never studied it. That was my mistake. I shouldn't have done that. If you're moving there now, just have it in your head, I'm going to learn the language. It will help you in so many ways. And they really appreciate it in Turkey because of their history. Okay. The other thing is, I would say, because Turkey has the history that it has in terms of secularism, in terms of the Islamic knowledge that is spread and not spread amongst the average people, I would say live in a bubble. Go find a bubble. Don't, like some people, what they do in Turkey, they find the most beautiful place in Antalya or whatever, in the mountains overlooking the sea, and they're like, yeah, this is amazing. I don't think that's what life is about and what Hijrah is about, personally. I think you want to go to the big cities where you have like religious enclaves. The only one really I can really recommend is Başakşehir in Istanbul. This has a lot of religious people and a lot of foreigners. So you'll feel like it's more multicultural. You have Arabs, you have people from Central Asia, you have Turks, of course, you have a few Westerners. You have a nice mixture of people, and they're all more religious leaning. So you're gonna enjoy that, you're gonna like that. And because outside of that area, a lot of people, they're not that inclined to Islam in a way that you would like relate to or say that they are, right? I personally, I do not agree. I do not recommend you live this like tourist lifestyle where it's just you and your family, you, your wife, your kids, and you're just like doing your own thing, and you don't really have many connections to the people of that place that you live in. I think you have to integrate in some sort of community. In Turkey, you have the option of the Arab community or the Turkish community, pretty much. So that means you have to learn Turkish and go all in with that, and that comes with its stuff, or you have to learn Arabic and go all in with that. In terms of Westerner community, there isn't much. There isn't enough where you can rely on it to like stay there, right? And so if you want friends and stuff for your kids and your kids to grow up with some sort of community around them, then you're going to have to, I think, pick one of these two to kind of integrate into. And having said that, so many positive things about Turkey. I really enjoyed my time there. I think it was very beneficial for me and my family. However, it's an unstable country in terms of immigration system. It's unstable. Even in terms of politics, politically, it's unstable. The elections can swing either way, right? The direction of the country can swing either way. We've had 20 whatever years of the current party there ruling with their style. And in 2028, we don't know what the elections will bring. So that's just something to know as well. Okay, next place that I would consider is Malaysia. Now, I've never lived in Malaysia. I visited Malaysia. Of course, I know people who have lived there longer, who moved there from Turkey, etc. I know about that. And so I'm just going to give my analysis from what I know and from somebody who's lived in many countries. Malaysia is a beautiful country. The people are very nice. Of course, the infrastructure seems good from what I saw in Kuala Lumpur and even elsewhere. Like, it seems generally good, okay, on the more developed side compared to most of the world. English is also widespread, but it's not like everywhere. I felt that, yeah, English, you just know English and it's good enough. It probably is enough in like Kuala Lumpur, but I feel like there would maybe be an element where you might want to learn Bahasa language. So that's something. In the initial years, you'll get along because English is fine, but I think you probably would want to learn the language. Now, the other thing, if you're going to live in like the most developed and big area near the international airport and all that, Kuala Lumpur, you're probably going to want to live in an area that is mostly Malay area. One thing I noticed when I was staying in KLCC, the city center, is there was a lot of un-Islamic vibes over there. There were bars. I went to a restaurant, there was alcohol being served and stuff. I didn't really expect that from Malaysia, but Malaysia has the Chinese population, which are not Muslims at all. And so wherever you're going to live, of course, yes, naturally, you're going to want somewhere comfortable and somewhere developed. But I think you should consider what area has the most Malays, right? Where the population generally are Malay and therefore they're Muslim. Also keep in mind, like, although I know Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, like, is seen as developed, the rest of the country might not quite be like that. So if you're considering other areas, just keep that in mind. I don't know personally, but I would look into that. I wouldn't assume the whole country is as developed and has the same infrastructure as Kuala Lumpur. The other thing, and of course, I'm always kind of thinking in terms of long term. That's what Hijrah is, to be honest with you. When you're living in Malaysia, what community are you going to mix with? Are you going to mix in with the Malays? Therefore, you're going to live in their neighborhood, speak their language, and kind of melt in. I don't know if people have experiences doing that and succeeding at that or not. That's one option. The other option is You're going to mix with Malays a little bit, but you're going to mix maybe a bit more with other foreigners. Now, the question is, what are the different groups of foreigners living in Malaysia, living in Kuala Lumpur or the other cities? Where are they from? Are they kind of people that you would speak the same language as and you'd be able to kind of mix into their community? For example, there are a lot of Yemenis in Malaysia, but would you be able to mix into their community or not? Just realistically, is that going to happen? Because again, I recommend you have a community that you mix with, especially for your kids' upbringing. Maybe for you as an adult, especially as a man, you're not too bothered. You want to do your work, you take your family some places, you chill, you whatever, do your ibadah, whatever you want to do. But for your kids, they need to grow up with a community. People, especially who are religious leaning, and they want to look around at their friends and think, yeah, everyone is like this. There's a good group of people who are like this, who are solid, who are religious. You need that for your kids. And so you got to think of that community in Malaysia. Do your research on that. Now, of course, the big thing with Malaysia, though, is the distance from a lot of countries. It might be pretty solid for an Australian, right? You speak English, they speak English. You are, I believe, 5 hours flight away, right? Which for an Australian is a very short flight, right? So for Australians, it could work. But for someone from the UK, the US, it might just be way too far. You know, the flights to visit family back home might be too much, too expensive and too long, too tiring, etc. And it might just not work in that sense. Now, yes, from a purely Hijrah perspective, the Muhajirun, when they went to Medina, they didn't know if they would ever return to Mecca, right? So you got to keep that in mind as well. But just when you're looking at different options, obviously, you're going to take that into account. And I know a lot of people, they don't consider Malaysia for that reason, because it's just so far away from family, etc. And finally, I don't know, I would just add this because I felt this when I was there. For me, the climate didn't work, right? Not that that's the top of the criteria for Hijrah, but if I was able to choose, I would much prefer like Mediterranean climate compared to a tropical, very humid, very rainy climate. And that's just what I think. Okay, now the next one is Morocco. Now, again, I've never lived in Morocco. I am Algerian. That might make me biased in one direction or the other. But I did visit Morocco a year or two ago. I went to Tanja, specifically Tangiers, which is on the north coast of Morocco. And I was very surprised. Coming from being an Algerian and visiting Algeria a lot as I was growing up, etc., I found Tanja to be very developed. Like, wow, it's like Morocco. It's like Algeria, but it's like developed. Like, wow. Later, I learned that Tanja is one of the more developed cities in Morocco. More, a lot of Moroccans even want to move there. Some more wealthy Moroccans live there. And it's always been a city where quite a few foreigners would pass through or would live, etc. But I was positively surprised. I think it's very possible to live in Morocco. I don't know what the general impression is of Morocco by others. Maybe some of the brothers think, oh, Morocco and the women and will marry from Morocco, like that was some sort of trend. But just generally, as a society, Moroccans are very nice people. They're quite close to the deen, a certain few of them. And they're generally very nice people. Very nice, very helpful, very friendly. Obviously, in the touristy areas, you're going to get people who are different. But outside of there, I would say it would work. The thing about Morocco as well is it's an open country. So the people are quite open-minded and open in general. They're a country where people have always kind of been coming, either for holiday or trade or whatever it was. And therefore, they're also easygoing with residency. Like some people, they literally go there, they get 3 months, just 3 months, 3 months tourist, whatever, residency, whatever it's called. And then they will literally just cross the border and come back 3 months, cross the border, and they just live like that for years. But there is a process of getting an actual residency permit, and I believe that's like renewable, right? Like renewable for year after year. Eventually you might get 2 years, even I heard 3 or 5 years, right? So I believe that they would be quite easygoing with that based on their country, how their country is, especially with a Western passport, if that's what you've got. I think they would be quite open with that, just how they are, just how they're a touristy country, and they got the World Cup coming up and all of that stuff. And so I think that side of things would be relatively stable. Also, the location is good, very close to Europe and pretty close to the rest of the Middle East, obviously close to North Africa. Not the closest, I guess, for Umrah and stuff like that, but that is what it is. You can even drive, or take a ferry across to Spain and stuff. Religiously, my impression of Moroccans, I think it's a little bit similar to Algeria, maybe not as conservative as Algeria, but generally they're a Muslim people, And the way they speak and the way they are, their culture, it's quite an Islam orientated society and culture. I know, you've probably seen some of the Moroccan shuyukh who are out and about on YouTube and stuff. You can see that there are public classes you can attend and stuff in Morocco. That leads me to the language. Morocco is an Arab country, right? I probably shouldn't say it, people are going to flame me for that. But what I mean is they speak Arabic, okay? That's what I mean by Arab country. Therefore, you get the advantage that by living in Morocco, you can learn Arabic. Now, people might say, oh, well, that's a different type of Arabic and no one understands that. It's still Arabic and they're still going to be, in school, what do you think they're learning in school? They're learning Fusha, like Arabic, right? And so they're exposed to Arabic. There's Arabic written in the streets. You're going to find Arabic teachers. And so, it's a great opportunity for you and your kids to learn Arabic. And again, as with any country, maybe with the exception of the Gulf, because it's a unique situation, I would recommend that you try and integrate into the community, right? In Morocco, there are probably two communities that I can think of. There is the Moroccan society, the general society, and then there's probably a lot of French people, Moroccans of French origin, or maybe Moroccans of German, Dutch, whatever origin, who have moved back to Morocco. So if you speak French or whatever, you can mix with that group. But I always recommend trying to integrate fully with the society. And that will allow you a lot more opportunities in terms of study, in terms of dawah, activism, volunteering and charity work and stuff like that. That would be very good. Otherwise, yes, there's a lot more foreigners, if you like, or non-born and raised Moroccans than like Algeria or certain countries. So yeah, that's good. But honestly, right now, today, if I had to leave Algeria, maybe the first country I would consider is Morocco. That's what I would say. Now, the last one, you've been waiting to see which one I'm going to mention. And this is turning into a long video, but it just is what it is. Each country has its own thing. The last one I would consider, I would put on this list is Egypt. When I think of Egypt, I think of Islamic knowledge, Quran. There's just tons of it, right? Which we're talking about here. We're not talking about holiday. We're not talking about living just where there's adhan. This, by the way, side note, this drives me nuts. People get obsessed with adhan. I can hear the adhan. I'm in Dubai Mall and I hear the adhan. But what else is there in Dubai Mall? Anyway, Egypt is a place where legitimately you would go there and you would think, yes, this is great for me and my family, for our Quran, for our Arabic, for our Islamic studies. It would be great. So that's the first thing that we've got to say about Egypt. Also, it's very affordable to live in Egypt, even with high quality, high standard of living. You're going to find a lot of areas in Cairo that are very developed and fancy and nice and stuff. And it'll be relatively affordable for you, depending on where you're getting your income from. I'm assuming you're getting income from abroad. The other thing about Egypt is there's always been people going there for the last decades to study. So there's always been foreigners from Indonesia, from the Caucasus, from other Arab countries, from Africa, people from Western Europe as well. People go there to study. And so the Egyptians, especially in certain areas, they're used to foreigners. The Egyptian, even the government and police, they're used to having foreigners in their country. It's not a brand new thing, right? It's probably more established than like Turkey and Algeria and stuff like that. So I think that would make things easier for you. Again, it's an Arabic speaking country, which is amazing. You might say that's not amazing because in the Gulf, I can just go and keep speaking English. But is that good for you or bad for you? Of course, it's better for you to learn Arabic. And the best way to learn Arabic is to live in an Arab country. So in Egypt, you're going to have access to the teachers and you're going to have access to the language being spoken in the streets, and you're going to have to learn it and speak it. And that's going to be great for you, no matter how intimidating it is right now. I think it's definitely worth considering. Of course, yes, you might say, oh, the government cracks down on this and that. I think that's very common in a lot of countries. And so that just kind of is what it is. But I think you'll still find a lot of access to knowledge and a lot of classes you can attend in private and stuff like that. This is one of the countries the only country I've not visited even. But inshallah, I would like to visit there. In fact, even in the future, I was speaking to a friend of mine who lives in Egypt. And I was thinking, yeah, I think I would take my kids there for like summer holidays to like Quran camps, like intensive Quran camps or something like that. Because that's just where it's all popping off. It's quite a central location. It's close to Mecca. It's close to Algeria for me. It's close to wherever you might need to go. Like Turkey is just there. The UAE is there, I don't know, for business or whatever. And then you've got Europe not too far away as well. So it's a great location. The climate, I can't speak too much on the climate, but I hear it's not that bad. Obviously in the north would be more Mediterranean climate, but then Cairo, I can't really speak to that. So these are the countries that I would consider. I told you, I gave away the one that I would mostly consider if I had to leave Algeria right now. But everybody's different. And I've told you the things to think about and to consider when moving a country. And just remember, if you're living right now in whatever, Texas, in London, in Birmingham, in Melbourne, wherever you're living, you're born and raised there, you've never moved to another country, it's going to be intimidating. But don't add extra pressure to yourself by saying, I'm moving to whatever, Bahrain, and I'm going to live there for the next 20 years. That's too much pressure. First, visit the country for a few months if possible, whatever you can do. A few months. If you like it, then move there for a year or two. And then after a year or two, you can really say whether this is the right place for you and you're going to stay there for like 10, 20 years at that point. Or, no, there are these things that we think we can get from this country, so we're going to go there, right? Don't put that pressure that this has to work out. It has to be their 10, 20-year thing. So that's what I would say. Sorry for the long video. Inshallah, it is very comprehensive though. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.